Stand up.
Hello, friends. Welcome to August. I am at my parents' house where I celebrated my dad's 80th birthday last night. And thanks to everybody who passed along your kind birthday wishes to Chisel D, my dad, the legend. We had a great time. And I'm very excited to be back here with you and to see you at tonight's Hangout. So join us at 8 p.m. at the Zoom Hangout that we've been doing since March 2020. Can you believe it? If you're a paid subscriber, you should get an email with the link. If you didn't, let me know and I'll send it to you. standuppapete@gmail.com. See you tonight at 8 p.m. East. My guest on today's show, Deep State Radio's David Rothkopf, joins me for another great conversation. Always love catching up with Rothkopf. That begins at 20 minutes into today's show. But let's get to those headlines before we get to my conversation with David. And as always, remember, I cannot do this without your paid subscriptions. Go to patreon.com/PeteDominic now to sign up or upgrade your subscription and pay more. Thank you very much for all of those who do. Okay. Well, the presidential election is just 96 days away, and yesterday the disgraced former president further disgraced himself at the National Association of Black Journalists Convention, which was controversial just at the invitation. He questioned Kamala Harris's racial identity and much, much more. We'll get to that later in the week. It's already been driving the day yesterday. This horrific man just saying even more horrific shit. But there's more. Yesterday, the United Automobile Workers Union endorsed Kamala Harris, which is a huge deal. More than 100 Silicon Valley investors also pledged to back Kamala Harris. You hear a lot about these tech bros, but this group, including Democratic donors, more than 100 venture capitalists on Wednesday said they pledged to vote for Vice President Kamala Harris in November, and it solicited donations for a presidential campaign in a rejoinder to the splintering among tech leaders over whom to support in the election, reporting from the New York Times. The man who led Hamas's political operations from Qatar was just assassinated in Tehran, Iran, after he attended the inauguration of Iran's newly elected president. Ismail Haniyeh was killed, though not clear how yet, and Israel has not commented on his death. Hours before the assassination, Israel killed a senior member of Hezbollah in an airstrike in a Beirut suburb. The assassination of the Hamas leader, of course, threatening wider war. Yesterday, the Federal Reserve, the chairman, Jerome Powell, opened the door for a September rate cut, though they held rates steady, but look for September for a potential rate cut, everybody's saying. More fallout over the Venezuelan election results suggesting that Maduro actually lost, though he's claiming that he won. But their electoral body announced this week that the country's authoritarian president had comfortably won another 6 years in office, but partial election results provided to the New York Times by researchers associated with the country's opposition offered evidence that called official result into question. So that's crazy. The man accused of plotting the September 11th attacks and two of his accomplices have finally agreed to plead guilty in exchange for life sentences, talking about Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Walid bin Atash, and Mustafa al-Hawsawi. I don't know if I'm saying that right. They reached a deal in talks to prosecutors across 27 months at Guantanamo detention facility and approved on Wednesday by a senior Pentagon official overseeing the war court. I'm very interested in learning more about that story. But folks, these are just the headlines. I don't really delve too deep into them, but I do in our conversations and further segments. About this terrible news, the South Carolina Supreme Court ruled yesterday that death by electrocution, firing squad, or lethal injection are all legal forms of execution in the state, finding that none could be considered a cruel or unusual punishment because inmates can choose the option they consider least painful. What? Yeah, I read that right. Okay. South Carolina seems like a nice place to die. In Ukraine has finally received the first F-16 fighter jets that it sought for months to fight back against an onslaught of Russian missile strikes, according to a U.S. official who spoke to the Associated Press. And in a heartbreaking report, nearly 1,000 American Indian, Alaskan Native, and Native Hawaiian children died while attending boarding schools that were set up by the U.S. government for the purpose of erasing their tribal ties and cultural practices. This, according to a report released on Tuesday by the Interior Department, a report that probably wouldn't be released if the Interior Department wasn't headed by Secretary Deb Haaland, who herself is a Laguna Pueblo citizen and the first Native American cabinet secretary. And she's led this effort in accounting for Native American children who attended federal boarding schools. This, of course, was from the early 1800s to the late 1960s, where the U.S. government removed Native children from their families and homes and sent them to boarding schools where they forcibly assimilated. Huge report released yesterday, and more to learn about that as well. America's shameful past cannot hide forever. And I don't do sports or Olympics here, if that's what you're looking for. This is not the place, but I'm following it loosely. It brings me some joy, but I'm not reporting back to you here on the show for it. But yeah, let's definitely talk about it at tonight's Hangout if you'd like. All right, those are your headlines for yesterday. Oh, here's one more. It is official. Even though I don't do pop culture either, Jennifer Lopez and Ben Affleck have apparently officially divorced. That's right. Okay, now that you know that information, and you can move on with your day and live your life with purpose and happiness. Let's see, what have I got for you now for some sound clips before we get to my conversation with David Rothkopf? Just a few clips, and I'm not going to play any of Trump's disgraceful comments at the conference yesterday for black journalists, the National Association of Black Journalists Convention. But, of course, he questioned Kamala Harris's identity as a black woman in front of an audience of black journalists. And from start to finish, his appearance was really contentious, denounced the lead, one of the anchors, the ABC News anchor, Rachel Scott, as rude and nasty, sparred with the women over the merits of diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. He told the group that he was the best president to the black population since Abraham Lincoln. It was one of the most disgraceful and unusual appearances of the presidential campaign so far, and even many of his supporters on television elsewhere thought it was a terrible idea for him to go. Others tried to give him credit for walking into the, quote, lion's den. But if it was an opportunity for him to gain votes from black folks, I'm not sure if he accomplished that, especially as he runs against the first black woman ever to be nominated by a major party. So I'm not going to play any of the clips from that yesterday. I'm sure you've heard them all, and I can't bear to listen to them again myself, much less subject you to them. But let's start with my friend Laura Coates on CNN last night, because she had Senator Raphael Warnock on her show, and he's always great. So that I will play for you.
Well, the man has no agenda. He has no vision. And so people who have no vision traffic in division. They don't know how to lead us, and so they're focused on dividing us. We should not forget how Donald Trump entered into the world of politics in the first place. Remember, it was literally challenging the birth certificate of Barack Obama. He literally rode in on division even before he announced his candidacy, and then he came down that escalator. And later on, as he announced that he was running for the presidency, and he spent all of his time trying to convince each of us to be afraid of other people who are our neighbors, to be afraid of our neighbors. And we should always be afraid of politicians who tell us to be afraid of our neighbors. We should be wary of those politicians at the debate, saying that, these immigrants are coming across the border, taking black jobs. So whether it's trying to separate brown people from black people, trying to somehow lift up part of Kamala Harris's identity over against the other part, as if she has to choose, as if we have to choose between who we embrace. I mean, it's a very narrow, bigoted, short-sighted vision is who he is. And I think the more we're reminded of it, the more we know what's at stake, the very soul of our country.
All right. Good stuff from Senator Raphael Warnock on CNN with Laura Coates. Also over on CNN with Abby Phillips was Scott Jennings. He is a Trump supporter and one of the Republicans contributors over at CNN. And he actually told the truth. He said that Trump shit the bed, although he said crap the bed. Listen to this.
Okay, so what does it mean to turn black? I mean, first of all, it almost sounded like he'd been thinking about this for a long time, and he'd rehearsed it in his head, and then he finally came out with this new line of attack. But why?
I don't know if I agree with that. Look, first of all, I think he deserves some points for showing up at this thing and giving it a go. Where's Kamala Harris today? Not there. But that having been said, he did crap the bed today. The only question is whether he's going to roll around in it or get up and change his sheets.
Well, he's definitely going to roll around in it. Let's be clear. He's going to double down and go even deeper. Here is Senator Tom Cotton, who's an absolute disgrace. He was on CNN with Caitlin Collins. He could not defend Trump's comments, although he tries.
I just want to quote his words to you, Senator. He said, "I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know. Is she Indian or is she black?" You can defend those comments tonight?
And he also said either is fine, both is fine. He loves African Americans, he loves Indian Americans, he loves all Americans. The point is that we don't know where she stands politically because she spent her entire life as a dangerous San Francisco liberal. And now
all right, well, he doesn't love all Americans. He doesn't love anyone. He doesn't know what love is, obviously, unless it's about himself. And he probably doesn't even like himself either, let's be honest. Here's Senator Mark Kelly on CNN last night.
She's got great momentum. She's a fantastic, historic candidate. And who is he? He's a convicted felon. He's got a sentencing hearing, I think, in September. He's been indicted for other felonies.
So he may be the vice president, looking more like it's going to be Josh Shapiro, though still not confirmed who that's going to be, the vice president. Talk more about that with David Rothkopf coming up. And Kamala Harris, finally, she weighed in on this yesterday. The vice president was back in Houston for the second time in over a week for a few different events between Wednesday and Thursday, including she'll be delivering a eulogy at Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee's funeral service. But here's what she had to say about all of this yesterday. Well, at least a little bit of what she had to say.
We all here remember what those 4 years were like. And today, we were given yet another reminder.
Yeah.
This afternoon.
Oh, yeah. Here it comes.
Donald Trump spoke at the annual meeting of the National Association of Black Journalists. And it was the same old show. The divisiveness and the disrespect. And let me just say, the American people deserve better. The American people deserve better. The American people deserve a leader who tells the truth, a leader who does not respond with hostility and anger when confronted with the facts. We deserve a leader who understands that our differences do not divide us. They are an essential source of our strength. So I say to Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated, ours is a fight for the future.
All right, Kamala Harris at a sorority event in Houston yesterday. And finally, let's go over to The Daily Show last night, where Ronnie Chang was the host. And he picked up on Donald Trump saying that, is she Indian or is she black? I think somebody should look into that. He actually said that.
Should look into that. I don't know what's worse, that he thinks she turned from Indian to black, or that he thinks someone should look into that. Who should look into that? Like, does he think the FBI is the federal black investigators? I don't think she turned from Indian to black, okay? She's Indian and black. Like, what does he think happens? When the time is right, Indians go into a cocoon and they play some Drake and they come out black. It's very clear that Trump doesn't quite know how to handle Kamala Harris right now. He's trying to find the angle of attack. And today, he was hitting her race. Yesterday, he was hitting her age.
She is younger. I mean, she's 60 years old. A lot of people, I didn't realize she was 60. I thought she was a little younger. But she's 60.
I guess Trump just discovered that black don't crack. I mean, this is going to be the first time he does birtherism as a compliment. Like, show us your birth certificate because you don't look a day over 50, okay? So just drop the skincare routine, girl. I bet Trump spent the rest of the day just Googling how old other black people are. Like, Morgan Freeman, 200 years old, question mark?
All right, there you go, everybody. That's your headlines and your sound. Hopefully that comes across okay technically and formatically. I don't know. I'm in my childhood bedroom in central New York, and I've got my remote kit, as I call it. I bring my gear everywhere, and I plan to do this all over the place during the election. At least that's the plan right now. We'll see. I'm trying to figure out where to go and what to do. I talked to a longtime listener yesterday on the phone named Tom Filene, who is a very funny comedian, and he's a teacher, and I think I'm going to have him on the show. And he reminded me about the old show, Sirius XM. He misses me talking to people I don't agree with on a regular basis, people that would call into the show especially. And so he's like, why don't you go to some of those people and talk to them during the next couple of months across these swing states? So there's something there. If you want to help figure out what that should be, I'd love to talk to you about it, and I will at tonight's Hangout, which I hope to see at 8 p.m. But right now, it's time to get to Deep State Radio's David Rothkopf, who we always love talking to. I talk to him almost every week. I think he's one of the smartest, funniest, well-connected commentators, pundits, analysts in all of politics and news and foreign policy. And you can hear him, of course, over at Deep State Radio, where they have a whole bunch of awesome podcasts. You can read him now regularly at his Substack, which is so good. Need to know. DavidRothkopf.substack.com. Of course, you can also read him at the Daily Beast. Follow him on Twitter, where he is doing great work still, and hear him right now on today's show. By the way, if you hear any clipping or any cutoff during this interview, please let me know. I'm using a new app to edit, and I'm going to give it a run right now. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's always great when I get to sit down with David Rothkopf, so let's do it right now. First, I'd like to jump into all the things that are happening right now, which is a lot. You've been writing a lot about them, but before I get started on any specifics, I do want to mention you have been writing about Kamala Harris as much as and as long as almost anybody. You recognize her talent for a long time. What is your relationship with her? You've met her. Or why have you taken this interest in writing about her and talking about her?
Honestly, I thought she was a good candidate when she was running for president. She didn't have a very successful campaign for a variety of reasons that I don't think reflect badly on her. And when she became the vice presidential candidate, I thought there's really something here. She helped him win in some important states. She doesn't get enough credit for that. And then I noticed that she wasn't getting a lot of credit for all the work she was doing as vice president. And I thought, I have a small platform, I could remedy that a little bit. And I started writing about it. The more I wrote, the more I researched, the more I admired what she was doing. The more I admired the team around her. And the more I was irritated by the usual kind of DC buzz that was uninformed as far as I was concerned. And so I've been writing it because I think it's an important story. And I think that has manifested itself in the course of the past week, where she thus far has not made a wrong move.
It's been, what would the word be we should use to describe what we've witnessed? It's unprecedented in terms of just the time between finding out this new candidate and the election. It's been like 110 days. What do you say about what that means and why it matters?
First of all, she's been preparing for this her whole life, and she's certainly ready for it. In the past 6 months, really out on the campaign trail, going to historically black colleges and universities, taking the lead on the issue of women's reproductive rights, taking the lead on the issue of guns, taking the lead on a number of important international issues. She's been totally prepped and was totally ready. And I think what you saw in the course of the past week, which was a miracle, it wasn't something that could have been orchestrated. There were people who were a little prepared for it, but not so many people that all the things that happened could have been orchestrated. And you saw in the entire election turn on its head in a week. And whether it's her raising $200 million in small money or another couple of $100 million in big money, her getting every endorsement of every major leader in the party, all of these unprecedented, brand new. It's a brand new thing, these virtual rallies that have been taking place that have raised a lot of money, but have also mobilized people so that she now has approaching 200,000 volunteers in a week. And that's shown up in the polls, her favorability rating. Nobody's ever seen a turnaround like that. The battleground state numbers are turning out to be pretty good. And it just goes to show 100 days is plenty of time for an election. It was plenty for the British, plenty for the French. And this week, she's dominating the news with the VP pick. And starting the 19th, she'll dominate the news for a week with the Democratic National Convention. Trump looks back on his heels. He looks old. He looks exhausted. He looks, to me, I wrote the other day, he's the Willy Loman of politics. He's just this guy who's out there slogging and telling people that he used to be great, and he isn't anymore. And everybody's zeroing in on the use of the term weird, and I'm all for that. But I think the term that's really relevant is that he's tired.
He's had a really hard time adapting and letting go of the focus being on Joe Biden. And I can just say this from the standpoint of a comedian and watching his rallies, knowing that he's still doing the Biden bits because it's hard, David. It's hard to replace him. He's got that down. He likes those bits. He knows how they work. But he's no longer the candidate, and he's wasting time, and people are tired and falling asleep at his rallies.
Yeah, and he's falling asleep. And he's an old dude, and he's losing his marbles. And, you know, the every instinct that he has with regard to Kamala Harris is to say something that would end his campaign. Every instinct is to say something racist or misogynist. He uses his code words that she's nasty or that she's a bum or that she's crazy or that she's dumb or some kind of nonsense like that. But you know what he really means. And we know, everybody knows what he really means. And I think not only will she win, I think she's going to win big.
You know, what's interesting is how bad things got for Donald Trump so quickly as a result of this. And just today now, his nephew is out with the book and on all the television stations talking about how Uncle Donald used the N-word and said as recently when he was president that kids with disabilities should just die. It's horrible. It's his nephew. And he's now supporting Kamala Harris, by the way.
And so is Mary Trump. And his sister thought he was a loser. His mother thought he was a loser. And there's a reason for that. He's just an awful guy. Yeah. And the thing was that when he ran, he projected a certain degree of energy, and that came across as strength. And it turned out the American people would rather somebody who was strong and evil than somebody who was a little bit more nuanced. But that's over now. It's over. He's got nothing new to say. He's got no new patter. He's got no new material, to put it in the terms you were putting it.
What is that ringing sound? Very loud.
Well, the ringing sound is it's signal. Signal. All the political stuff I get comes on signal from people.
Yeah, I got to get more plugged in. Let me go back to Kamala Harris, though, and ask you, how did she get here in terms of politically? You mentioned this Washington Post, and there's a lot of other reporting about how Kamala Harris took control of the Democratic Party. How did she do that? How is she doing this?
Look, first of all, Kamala Harris was elected the first woman district attorney in San Francisco, and she was reelected. She was elected the first woman to be the Attorney General of California, and she was reelected. She was elected she was the second black woman in the Senate, I think, and was reelected in the Senate. So she won 6 important elections before she became the vice president, and then she helped the president win the election. She is a very seasoned politician. She's been doing this for 25 years, 23 years, something like that. Secondly, she is the entire apparatus of the Biden campaign behind her. It's just there. It was built. She is the record of the Biden-Harris administration, which is a very good record. So she doesn't have the issue that she had in 2019, which is like, where are you on each issue and how are you differentiated from each candidate? She's running on a record that already exists. And there was this kind of sense among Democrats that as much as many of them loved Joe Biden, he was not the guy for the job this time around. And so when she came in and everybody came in behind her, there was this kind of massive, not just a sigh of relief, but euphoria You've felt it. You've been talking to people a week. This past week, I've never seen anything like it. But people are like, some giant load has been lifted off of them, and they feel like life can be good again, and the Democrats can win, and Trump can lose, and we can do bold things with our lives, and we're going to have the first woman president, and the first Black woman president, the first Asian woman president. It's spectacular. It's exciting.
I love the way that you're talking and that you left open for this opportunity, and that now here we are. It's really such change in such a short amount of time, and you're seeing the grassroots support. I want to ask you about that. You had a great piece at your Substack. Welcome to the DIY election. Get to work. But first, quickly, you've also written a piece at the Daily Beast on the Veep stakes. You had to weigh in the obligatory pick, and you make your pick over at the Daily Beast. And I think you should tease it, and then people are going to have to read it or something. But why?
Because the editor said pick somebody. And I was like, but I think they're all pretty good. And frankly, originally, I was a big kind of Gretchen Whitmer guy. I thought, let's get the two strongest politicians. In the past, that's what we've always done. The fact that they're women shouldn't matter. But that sort of seems to have fallen by the wayside. And then there were other candidates who I think would have been good. Pete Buttigieg, I think, would be an excellent candidate. Break him down real quick. He's gay. He's gay. I don't think that matters. I think we're way past that. People are like, oh, America's not ready for a woman president, or America's not ready for a woman of color president. Well, that's not true, folks. The last three Democratic tickets, Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton, and now this one, have had a woman on them. 3 out of the last 4 have had a person of color on them. Yeah. This is where things are at the moment. And Pete Buttigieg has done an excellent job as a cabinet secretary. When he gets on Fox, they have to put on their helmets and their flak jackets because he is absolutely the best person at dismantling them publicly. He's a brilliant guy. I think he's a very likable, nice guy. And I think he'd be a good vice president. When I saw a short list, his name wasn't on it, so I didn't really consider him.
He's so young, too.
Well, he is young. So is Andy Bashir is young, who was another excellent candidate, but I didn't see him on the short list. The short list I saw was not, by the way.
I thought it was going to be Bashir. I put money on Bashir. I put $10 with a listener that it would be Andy.
Well, he's a good choice, and someday Andy Bashir will be on a national ticket. I'd be very surprised if he wasn't. So just to keep doubling down the bet. But Mark Kelly is an astronaut. His wife Gabby Gifford is a saint.
They don't have kids, and J.D. Vance says that
that's something.
She wrote a really heartbreaking piece that the reason she couldn't have kids because she got shot, and that J.D. Vance's comments for people like her are horrific.
She's just spectacularly great, and he's from a purple state, and he's a career Navy guy, and there's a lot of reasons why he'd be a good candidate. Josh Shapiro be the second Jewish person to be on a national ticket following Joe Lieberman, is an excellent governor of Pennsylvania. He, as Gretchen Whitmer said in a rally yesterday, the day before, he gets shit done and has been extremely effective. And of course, Pennsylvania is an important state. I just thought, part of it is what's the narrative? What's the vibe of the moment? And Tim Walz, who's the governor of Minnesota and is an extremely successful governor. He was a different kind of American hero. Astronauts are one kind. So are school teachers. He was a school teacher. He was a football coach. He brought his team of East Mankato or something to the state championship. They won the state championship in football. He's led, I think he set up when he was a school teacher, the first sort of group at the school to help BTQ kids. He's more importantly than that, in this campaign, in the course of the past couple of weeks of just people being out there in the internet, he's caught the vibe. He was the one who picked up on the word weird. He's funny. He's a regular guy. He is in many ways, and this is what I wrote in the article, to me, he's the Vance is a complete fraud. This guy is the real deal. He was, by the way, and an interesting distinction, he is the highest ranking non-commissioned officer ever to serve in the United States Congress. He was a command sergeant major, which is a very high enlisted rank. And that's different It's something that a lot of people across America can relate to. So to me, he's sort of the vibe candidate. He gets the vibe of the moment, the vibe of the campaign. And I think he would help amplify that. And he's also been a great attack dog, which is a role a vice president's supposed to play.
He was in the Army National Guard.
Yeah. Although he was also deployed to Europe at one point. But something he's taken. I think he was in the Army National Guard for 24 years.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, he does look great on paper, and then also just how he's caught fire with his comments and
right. And I was like, when this all started, I was like, who? I'm here in Washington. I read all the stuff. I've been very impressed by him, and Kelly a little boring, and Shapiro was a little bit too over the top, in my view, in his criticism of some of the protesters around Israel and Gaza. So they each have little bits of baggage. But as I said, if it was any of them, if it was Gretchen Whitmer, if it was Andy Bashir, if it was Pete Buttigieg, not only would they all be great candidates, which says something terrific about the Democratic Party, how much better would they be than this couch fucker?
What do you have to say about what has happened to this poor man? Just J.D. Vance every day is... I
mean, there's something deep. It's not weird. There's something broken in J.D. Vance. This guy, how many times has he changed his name?
He is a speed bag for comedians and commentators and journalists. He is a constant gift every day. I think Trump's going to have to...
He may. I saw an article just now saying a Republican Senate split on whether Trump should keep Vance. And I was like, I'm with whoever says keep it. He's so bad. And he said every day he says something horrible. And, if you don't have kids, you shouldn't vote. And people with a lot of kids should have extra votes. And single cat ladies are running the Democratic Party. But this other stuff, like, who changes their name? It wasn't just a little. It's like he didn't just adopt his grandma's name. He changed his name completely over and over again. He has said all these horrible things. One of the things that he said that didn't really get all the pushback, but I just found it like freaky, was somebody asked him about his wife, who's an Indian American. And he's like, she's not white, but, and I was like, what? How did he go home at night? Can you imagine walking in the front door and your wife's, so I'm not white, but? What do you mean by that but there, fella?
Now, you're being very harsh. What did you change your name from to Rothkopf, which does an injustice? It commits a crime on your lips as you pronounce it.
That's really nice of you to say, Pete Dominic, whose family name undoubtedly was changed.
Oh, yes.
What was the family name?
It was Lebanese. It was Syrian. It was Milhem. And apparently they just gave them Dominic. They just handed it. They're like, you're Dominic now. And they took the clothes and then walked off to Ellis Island. I don't know. Yeah, something like they just gave it to him.
It has nothing to do with the original name. My name means redhead.
Oh.
And it's a German word that means redhead. And there were a lot of red-haired Jews and it was just that's.
Oh, then it's an honor. And
it is an honor.
Getting back
yes, go on.
Getting back to J.D. Vance, it's not only the fact that he makes mistakes every time he speaks in real time. It's every day we're finding out things that he said in the past, and they're bad. I think you shared a TikTok where it's him just talking about I'm a never Trumper over and over again. The things he said specifically critical of Trump, much less other things about single women and so on. We keep finding these gems, and the young people are turning them into memes and TikToks and viral videos. They're making fun of him. Speed bag, I say.
Look, he called his running mate America's Hitler. That's not good. I would think that was
hard to walk back.
It's this is the arrogance of Trump, right? They call me a convicted felon. You are a convicted felon. They call me a traitor. You are a traitor. They call me a rapist. You are a rapist. Once you've crossed the rapist, traitor, convicted felon line, then the fact that he's used some bad words about his running mate doesn't seem to matter. And that's how they've gotten themselves into what is easily the least appealing political ticket in American history.
I think it's more than fair to say the most anti-woman ticket I've heard. A lot of people refer to it as well. What about this Project 2025 thing? As of today, they're trying to run from it. They're denouncing it, saying it never had anything to do with it, but journalists...
And the guy who ran it at Heritage stepped down, and Trump is like, yeah, no, I had nothing to do with that. Because the Democrats have been super duper effective and getting it out there and saying, we read this 900-page thing and it's the end of democracy. And it's terrible. And so does that mean he's disavowing it? Well, don't believe that for a minute. 140 Trump advisors worked on preparing this thing. If you don't think this is the blueprint, whether there's Project 2025 office operating at the Heritage Foundation or not, then I got a bridge to sell you. This is where they are going. And I don't know if you were going to mention this, but I wrote an article today in the New Republic about a series of scenario exercises that the Brennan Center organized.
Yeah, I didn't know that this was the kind of thing. I read that article. It's very interesting that just to read that folks like you contribute in these types of exercises. Go ahead. You get together a whole bunch of other... I was a participant. It was organized by a couple people I know, but the people who were there were like former governors, generals, members of Congress, people who ran the Republican Party, people who were senior Democrats, people who, there were 200. There were 5 different scenario exercises. They gamed out how Trump might act once he got into office, looking at different aspects of his announced plans. And then there was another sort of side in these war games, again, very high level, was Democrats. And then it was like, what do? Do you take them to court? Do you protest publicly? Do you do something in the Congress? Do you do something in the states? And the sad punchline, and you can go to the Brennan Center, which is what the group that organized this, and go to the Democracy Futures Project if you want to read about it, or you can read my article in the New Republic, or there was an article by one of the guys who organized it in the Washington Post today, Bart Gellman. There was an article by one of the women who organized it in the Bulwark, Rosa Brooks. And Democracy Futures Project, a series of 5 nonpartisan simulation exercises that envision different ways Trump and his administration might dismantle key elements of our democracy. You were about to say some of your findings, I think.
Yeah, but the point is that the Democrats had a very hard time stopping him because the Supreme Court has given him immunity, because the Congress will do whatever he says, because he can undertake executive orders and implement a lot of things without the approval of Congress, because a lot of the courts will go his way, because a lot of states will go his way. And so in the current environment with compliant Supreme Court and a supine Congress, what you're going to end up with is Trump getting his way and democracy getting screwed. And the Democrats, by the way, they tended to be, they've been like, let's sign a petition. Let's write an op-ed. And this reminds me of what happened with, past instances where the Republicans go scorched earth and the Democrats go, oh dear, they shouldn't do that. Mitch McConnell jams through Supreme Court justices. And then the Democrats are like, that's against tradition. We would never do that. And all of a sudden the country is screwed. And so, this essentially extrapolated that out in 5 different kind of wargaming exercises. And the conclusion that I came to, and this is just my view, there are other views that you can read at the site or in these articles, is there's no plan B. Either we beat him or he is going to drive this country into being an autocracy. And, in the past week, we've heard him say, dear Christians, you only have to vote this once and then you won't ever have to vote again. And the Republicans were like, oh, that's out of context and he didn't mean it, or it's a joke. And it's like, he keeps saying this shit. He's going to do it. How many times does he have to say it? This is what Maduro did. This is what Orban did. This is what dictators do. And our scenarios said, we can't stop. Try as we might. Short of violence and other things that people are understandably reluctant to do. And so there's one sure way to keep this autocratic scenario from playing out, elect Kamala Harris. That's the way. There's no plan B. Elect Kamala Harris if you want to have a democracy. If you don't care, then you're going to get a real bad outcome.
But you'll begin to care. Which leads us finally to your Substack Need to Know, where you have a very interesting prescription, if you will. You're saying that we need to decide, you write, in the next 99 days whether America remains a democracy or not. And if you preserve democracy, you're also going to likely have played a role in reinventing that ancient form of governance, of reclaiming the power that once went evermore to the rich. And you said, what if for the next 99 days, each of us decides we value democracy and the rule of law and our personal freedoms enough to devote an hour a day to DIY democracy? What are you asking us to do?
I'm asking to do the kind of things that have worked this past week, where people organize that are not affiliated with the campaign, and they have white dudes or people of different ethnic backgrounds or people from different places, and they set up online things and they raise money through those, or they set up online things and they get volunteers to do efforts to help the campaign. The reality is this: every single one of your listeners has a platform. Could be on Facebook, it could be on Instagram, it could be on TikTok, it could be on YouTube, it could be on Twitter, it could be on Substack, it could be on Threads, Blue Sky, wherever. Everybody's got a platform. Everybody's got some number of followers. Even if you got 10 followers, that's 10 people you can influence. If you've got 100 followers or 1,000 followers or 10,000 followers, and you spend an hour a day interacting with them and saying, what are you doing? Are you donating? Where do I volunteer? How do I donate money? Oh, I saw this Kamala Harris commercial. I'm going to share it with all of you. I saw a meme that I thought was effective. I'm going to share it with all of you. Every single person who listens to your podcast can make a difference beyond the obvious difference of voting. And that's a kind of amazing thing. We talked about this. We've never seen these big virtual rallies before last week. We never saw it. And all of a sudden, the way politics is conducted has changed completely.
I, for one, want to go plant myself in probably Pennsylvania somewhere, do the podcast, talk to people. I don't know how to be most effective, what kind of neighborhood, where to go, what to do. But I heard Ben Wickler say one of the best things you can do is go live in a swing district for a little while. So if I brought my microphones and podcasted from different places in Pennsylvania, I'm hoping I could meet people and talk to people. And I don't know. So if you have any suggestions for me of where to go.
No, but I think you don't need a suggestion. That's a great idea. Go to Pennsylvania, go to Michigan, go to Wisconsin. Georgia's now in play. North Carolina's in play. Arizona's in play. In an amazing development, the Harris campaign is deploying 6,000 volunteers in Florida because they think Florida can be in play, because she mobilizes young people. She mobilizes suburban women. She mobilizes people of color. She has got what it takes to get the turnout, and the turnout is what's going to determine this election. If you go out in those places and meet them and energize them and communicate what you hear, you're going to be helping a lot too.
There it is. David Rothkopf giving us some homework, and we will follow through and hopefully hold us accountable. Thank you very much for joining me. As always, I appreciate you being here.
I'm delighted to do it, and I'm glad to hear what you got planned.
Well, there you have him, David Rothkopf, Deep State Radio. Thank him for joining me. Go over there and let him know you always appreciate it. Go to Twitter, go to his Substack, and subscribe. Read him at the Daily Beast. Of course, subscribe and listen to Deep State Radio. That's all I have for you. I hope to see you at tonight's Hangout, and I now have to get in the car to drive the 4 hours back home after celebrating my dad's birthday. You guys are the best, and I cannot do it without you. Thank you very much. Love you. Talk to you tonight. John Carroll, take us away.
Let the meek weak flee. Oh, you better stand up. Stand up. When you're tired of begging, saying pretty please, that's the time you gotta finally get up off of your knees. When you can't see the forest for the burning trees, you got to stand up. Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you got to stand up. Stand up. I think you're driving weak. better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You gotta stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You gotta stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear and all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. And even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for loss, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change would begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom never go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.